This is Suit Up Sports.
Suit Up Sports.
Where opinions are as sharp as a tailored suit. No fluff, no gimmicks, just unfiltered, hard-hitting takes on sports and a whole lot more. It's time to suit up. Now here's your host, DJ the Suit Stout.
Welcome to Suit Up Sports. I'm DJ the Suit Stout. Coming at you solo today. My partner in crime, Frank Garcia, is on a well-deserved vacation in Cabo. So don't feel sorry for him at all. He's having a good time there for the week. I'm sure he'll be playing some golf as well as a lot of other things. But you got me solo tonight, and we've got a lot to talk about. This week is going to be an exciting week when it comes to the sports world. This weekend, we had a lot of good college basketball, a great race in Atlanta. Christopher Bell, your winner. So 2 races in, a lot of wrecks, a lot of angry drivers, but so be it. We have two great races, in my opinion, and I think a lot of the fans who like to see, aggressive driving and drivers who don't really like each other. I think we've had that the first 2 weeks. We'll have Shannon Spake joining us later. You'll know her from all of our NASCAR coverage with Fox, NFL coverage with Fox, and now she's the sideline reporter for the Charlotte Hornets. Does a great job, in my opinion, one of the best in the business, and she'll join us a little bit later from Sacramento, California, where the Hornets take on the Sacramento Kings tonight. And let's start off, though, with college hoops. Some really big games this weekend, some top-ranked teams taking care of business. We'll start with Duke, who played Illinois in Madison Square Garden. Listen, everybody understands that Duke, when they're playing in Madison Square Garden, it might as well be a home game. And Illinois has been banged up. They have a lot of players who have been sick with the flu, to the point where their head coach didn't even let them shake hands with Wisconsin after a game because he didn't want them to spread whatever virus they had. So they're coming in banged up, but they also ran into a buzzsaw. Duke is playing the best basketball in anyone in the country right now. 3 young freshmen that are getting a lot of minutes. Cooper Flagg, arguably the best player in the country as a freshman, certainly will be the first pick in the NBA draft. And Duke just put it on them. It's rare to see a college basketball game of 2 teams that are really good, and I do think Illinois is a really good team. And Duke just put it on them. Maybe it was the illnesses that Illinois had been going through, but man, Duke's playing great right now. Alabama, Auburn, Florida, Tennessee. There's a lot of other good teams out there who I think all will have just as good of a chance to win the whole thing as Duke. But Duke is playing the best basketball in the country. Auburn, who's the number 1 team in the country, even after a loss, they still remain number 1. And Georgia gave them a battle on Saturday. Georgia's a good team. The NCAA committee this year is going to have their hands full, because there's a lot of teams who are worthy of being in the tournament who are going to have bad conference records, especially if you're in the SEC. You're looking at teams that are going to be, have 4 or 5 wins in the conference who are still the best 40, 50, 60 teams in the country. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the NCAA committee breaks it down and who gets in and who doesn't. One thing we do know is that the ACC is probably going to have 3 teams. I don't see how a 4th team gets in unless they just win the tournament like NC State did last year when they went on their incredible run. Duke's in, Clemson's in, and those 2 obviously are for sure. Louisville's in, and then you've got everyone else fighting. Pittsburgh, the Tar Heels, who I know a lot of you who are listening or watching this are Tar Heel fans. And look, they showed some fight the last 2 games. They handedly took care of Virginia, and if they can win out minus Duke, I don't think they'll beat Duke at home, but you never know. Wouldn't shock anybody. Anyone that knows the Duke-Carolina rivalry knows that it really doesn't matter how good either team is. It's going to be a game Although I said the same thing before they played the first time this year, and Duke wore them out. I don't expect that to happen in Chapel Hill. But I think if Carolina can win out minus that game, and then win some games in the tournament, maybe they have a shot to get in. But more than likely, I think you're going to have Duke, Carolina, and Louisville representing the ACC, and that's probably the fewest amount of teams that the ACC's had in the tournament in a long time, certainly longer than I can remember. And granted, my memory is not great, but man, we're used to the days where the ACC would be putting 5, 6, 7 teams in there, and to only have 3 this year just kind of shows you what the league has been, and it just hasn't been that good, especially when you compare it to a league like the SEC, where every night you're facing a top 10, top 15, top 20 team, and man, there's some talent in the SEC. You also have a team like St. John's in the Big East who put it on UConn. And, UConn hasn't been the same team that has won the national championship the last 2 years. They've definitely struggled. I think their guard play has just been pretty bad. I don't think they've got the guards to get it done. And I think everyone that follows college basketball and certainly the NCAA tournament knows that guard play is how you win these tournaments. And I just don't see UConn having that guard play. I don't think their point guard has what it takes to lead a team that far. And so it'll be interesting to see. But St. John's, man, Rick Pitino has done a great job of putting a team together after just 1 year at St. John's. So this is his second year, and inherited a team that had done nothing for a long time. And it just goes to show you what a good coach can do for any program. And I think that transcends any sport. And Rick Pitino is doing it, and watching his team play, and I've watched most of their games, especially the last 3-4 weeks. Man, they play defense and they're in shape. They'll run all day long, just like most Rick Pitino teams throughout, history, with whether it be Kentucky or Louisville or whoever. But man, they play it the right way, and they are fun to watch. I don't know if they've got enough consistent scoring to take it all the way to the championship, but I wouldn't want to play them. That's for sure. They are tough and physical, and they get after it. And, St. John's is an example. And we talked about this last week, of a team who the portal has really helped. Reading or watching or whatever college sports in general, not just basketball. Obviously the transfer portal, the NIL, has just really taken over. And listening to a lot of these basketball coaches over the past few weeks talk about how they are going to go about building a team in the future has been really, really interesting. You have a team like St. John's, for instance, with Rick Pitino, who says he's not even going to recruit any high school players next year. Even if a 5-star fell in his lap, he said he'd have a hard time taking them because he just doesn't think you can win with high school players. You have a team like Duke, who has 3 freshmen getting starter minutes, which is the most of any top 15, 20 team in the country, who look like they're going to be really hard to beat, but they've gone with the approach of taking the best freshmen you can get, adding in a couple guys from the portal, and throw the ball out there and let's see what happens. A lot of coaches this week, I read something yesterday where whether it be Division I, Division II, a lot of these coaches now are saying that they aren't even going to recruit high school kids because they see that the game now is going to come down to who can be more efficient when it comes to the portal. The portal is definitely a safer bet because you get to see these kids playing against college athletes, whereas in high school, these kids are playing against other high school athletes. And in a lot of cases, the kids they're playing against, won't even play college basketball, not Division I, Division II, Division III. So when you can get tape on a kid playing college basketball against college athletes, not only do you get great tape on how they perform, but you also have a track record of how are their grades, how are they in the locker room. And so it doesn't surprise me that a lot of teams are going to probably shift to the portal as a way to succeed. And the teams like Duke or some of these other teams who are still going to, recruit high school players and have great recruiting class like a Duke or a Carolina, here in the South in particular. It'll be interesting to see how that shakes out, because one thing we know about the tournament, not only is guard play really important, and having a veteran guard, point guard in particular, really carries a lot of weight. And when you're counting on freshmen, and Duke's lucky they've got Proctor, who's been there this year, but when you are counting on freshmen in those important positions, it's a risk when you can go out and get a guy who maybe played 2 or 3 years already in college. And all that obviously is after the guys that leave after 1 year. So the state of college athletics, but in particular college basketball, is going to be really interesting to watch as we move into the conference tournaments and the NCAA tournament. The product, in my opinion, of college basketball this year has been as good as I can remember in quite some time. I think that these teams are obviously gifted with great athletes. That hasn't changed, but I think that they're playing a little older school version of basketball. Not that they're not running and getting out on a break, and obviously there's a lot of 3-point shots being taken, which is kind of where we are today in basketball. But man, the physicality, the hustle, the defense, to me, it seems like it's gone up a little bit this year, and I've enjoyed watching it. I've watched more college basketball this year than I have in the past few years because of that. Because when I used to tune in, and I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this, is that you tune in to watch your favorite team, where you used to know everybody on the roster, the starting five, the next five, the 3 dudes at the end of the bench that never take their sweatsuits off, the 3 kids coming from wherever they're coming in the recruiting class next year. You didn't know any of these guys really. And then you watch the game and it was sloppy and, run and gun kind of thing. This year has not been the case. This year, these guys are playing hoops, and we talk about officiating a lot, and whether it be football, basketball, umpires and baseball, but I got to give it to the college basketball officiating this year. I feel like they've let these kids play. And regardless of the conference, I've watched games, whether it be on the West Coast, the East Coast, whether it be a game, St. John's, UConn, which was yesterday, which Big East is known for having bangers and physicality and all those things. I just feel like the officiating is letting these kids play basketball. They're not calling every ticky-tack foul. Now, some of you are going to say, well, did you see the BYU Arizona game? And there's always an exemption to everything, and that was an awful call, by the way. Arizona had no business losing that game, and the officiating was atrocious down the stretch, in my opinion. But for the most part, I think that the officials in college basketball, I don't know if it's a concerted effort that was brought down from the top, but regardless, they're letting them play. And I can't wait for the conference tournaments and the NCAA tournament, because I think the quality of basketball we're seeing right now in college is a lot better than what we've seen in the past few years. And again, you can, I'm sure, argue and debate me all you want, and you probably would have some valid points. But as far as I can see, and as far as I've watched as a fan, I've really enjoyed it. Even a team like Tennessee, who plays great defense, they have moments in time where they can't throw it in the ocean. But man, they play the right way. So I've really enjoyed college basketball right now, and Duke, Auburn, Tennessee, Florida, those teams, Houston, who plays an older style of basketball. They play really good D, slower pace, but I'm jacked about the conference tournaments and the NCAA tournament. I think college basketball right now is in a really good spot, especially considering what they've had to go through with all these changes. And we've seen a lot of great coaches get out. They didn't want anything to do with it. I saw an interview with Rick Pitino today where he said that not only is he not going to recruit high school players because they just wouldn't play for him right now, But he also talked about the physicality that his team plays with, and the fact that he feels that college basketball right now is on a really good track. And you hear it from a guy like that. I think it kind of backs up what myself and others are saying. So we'll pay attention to that as we go through this week. There's some really big games this week. Duke should be on cruise control. Houston, like I said, Houston, Florida, Tennessee. It's going to be tough to beat those guys. But, man, that SEC tournament this year, and Jay Bill has said it, winning that tournament could be harder than winning the NCAA tournament because it's loaded. We're used to saying that the SEC is loaded in college football, and they are. But, man, hoops is caught up. I mean, it is caught up, whether it's Ole Miss, Mississippi State. I mean, even teams like Vanderbilt and some of these teams that aren't even ranked, Georgia. There's no easy wins, and every night they're playing a top 10, a top 15, a top 20 team. So I'm looking forward to it. And some of these players, by the way, whether it be a guy like Cooper Flagg, that can do everything, freshman for Duke, certainly will be the first pick in the NBA draft, or whether it's a guy like Broome at Auburn who, is playing on one leg and transferred into Auburn and, wasn't really a great offensive player, was a really good defensive player, was good at blocking shots and had done that in his previous stop, but he turned himself now into like a really good offensive player. And you see him and the confidence that he has, and Bruce Pearl, who's a great coach. They've played some close games lately again, but I just attribute that to they're playing really good teams every night. There's really not a break. And I'm excited to see this move into these tournament time. Matter of fact, I wish we could just edit it out and let's start the tournament, because I think this year, the NCAA tournament in particular, is setting up to be maybe one of the most exciting we've seen. And that's coming off the last 2-3 years where we've had some upsets that we've never seen before, 16 being a 1, and things like that. And so I'm excited. And even though some of these guys will just see one and done, they'll be gone, and the next guys will come in. I think these teams with the veterans and in the top 10 or top 15 teams, there's only, I think Duke leads all those teams with 3 freshmen getting starter minutes. I think other than that, there's only 3 or 4 that have 1 freshman getting starter minutes. So there are going to be some veteran teams in this tournament this year who have been there, seen it, and have experience. So I'm excited. And this weekend was a lot of fun for college hoops. NASCAR, they were in Atlanta this weekend. Christopher Bell, overtime victory. And again, another draft race where there's going to be accidents. There's going to be one guy making a wrong move that's going to wipe out 3, 4, 5 cars, and we saw that again. Whether that's good or bad for NASCAR really is up to who's watching, but I think it's good. I think NASCAR right now has had a start to the season that they needed. Controversy is always a good thing. The wrecks at the end of these races, man, I wouldn't want to be leading a race in these tracks. No way. Give me 8th or 9th place with 10 laps left and take my chances, because the way these things are going, the guys in front of you are going to get wiped out, and you're going to cruise, through victory lane. But I think NASCAR has had a really good start to the season. You've had a little bit of everything. Like I said, you've had controversy, you've had drivers mad at each other, you've had accidents, you've had cars flipping over and through the air, and strategy, which you have always. And I think NASCAR's off to a good start, and Christopher Bell with the big win today in Atlanta. And now they'll move on next week and keep that train rolling. Golf, does anybody really get into golf yet? Everybody has the Masters on their calendar written down. You see the commercials already for the Masters, promoting it. And this tournament this weekend was like a who's playing. I think we knew like 2 guys on the leaderboard. And not to take anything away from the guys that were playing in the tournament and doing well, but until everybody's on the course together, all the good guys, I think we can kind of pump the brakes on that. But Augusta will be the first thing that we kind of circle. And there's also some news this week that they have moved forward a little bit with negotiating between Liv and the PGA. It sounds like it's inevitable that they are going to come to some type of agreement where, as a viewer, you are going to be able to finally see all the best players in the world in the same tournaments again, which a lot of us thought that was going to happen. You know, when Liv was throwing all these millions and millions and millions of dollars at these golfers, the entire time I thought, why would they not take it? Because there's no way they're not going to let these guys compete against the PGA guys at some point. There's just no way, because it diluted that product. And there's no way that at some point the powers that be are going to go, look, we need to put our pride aside, our differences aside, and figure out a way that Bryson DeChambeau and Koepka and Rahm are going to be playing against Rory and Tiger and Scheffler and whoever else. And it sounds like they are getting a lot closer to getting that done. And that's a great thing, not only for golf, but for viewers and fans, you know, as we are. And, you know, it definitely has been different without those guys participating in these tournaments. And so I'm excited that they're at least moving closer, and hopefully they get a deal done soon. And then this week's a huge week for all of you NFL fans. The combine starts this week on Thursday, and it's in Indianapolis as usual. And if you're a Panther fan or a Falcon fan or whoever you're a fan of, I'm sure you watch these now, the combine now at least a little bit, you know, knowing what your team is looking for in the draft. So, for instance, the Panthers, everybody knows last year, Dan Morgan, in his first year as the general manager, he needed to fix the offensive line. That was the first thing that he had to do. It had not been, their offensive line had not been good in years. Matter of fact, when I say not been good, that's really not even giving them the credit for how bad they were. The offensive line was putrid. And Dan Morgan in his first year signs 2 free agents, and bam, the offensive line was top 10 last year. And it appears that, you know, they're in good shape moving forward. Now he's got to fix the defense. They gave up the most points that any team has in NFL history. They could not stop the run to save their life. They had injuries everywhere, but even before the injuries, their defense was lacking. And so if you're watching this combine this week, I think a lot of Panther fans and Atlanta fans as well, because that's an area that they have to improve as well. The talent in this draft this year, especially on the defensive line, is probably the deepest it's been in a decade, if not more. You know, there are 30, 40 defensive players in this draft who really can make an impact in their first year. And if you're a Panther fan, knowing how bad they were against the run, and again, they get Derek Brown back, who, you know, is one of the best run stoppers in the NFL. He got hurt last year early in the season and missed the year. They'll get him back, which will obviously be a huge boost. But I think as a fan, as well as obviously the general manager and the coaching staff of the Panthers, are going to be really paying attention to the defensive players in this draft. Who knows how the 7 picks before the Panthers are going to go. You've got teams needing quarterbacks, so that always helps if you're a team like the Panthers, who thankfully figured out last year that Bryce Young is their franchise quarterback, and now are comfortable with that going into this draft. That's a huge deal for the Panthers. When you go into a draft and you need a quarterback, it's a tough thing, man. And the New York Giants, the Tennessee Titans, the Cleveland Browns, you know, the first 3 teams in this draft all need quarterbacks. And it'll be interesting to see if they reach for one of these guys. And this is by no stretch of the imagination a good quarterback draft. No one is willing to say, yep, Cam Ward is going to be a great quarterback. Shador Sanders is going to be a great quarterback. Dart is going to be a great quarterback. They all could be good, who knows, but it isn't like some of the quarterback drafts we've had the past last year in particular, where everyone had a pretty good feeling that a couple of these guys were going to pan out. In this draft, it's a big question mark. So it'll be interesting to see if a team like Tennessee goes with somebody like Abdul Carter, the defensive end from Penn State, who a lot of people say is the best player in the draft, and give Levis another year at quarterback. Cleveland is in a quandary, obviously, with the Deshaun Watson money that they owe him, which is a lot. They are going to be in salary cap jail for quite some time. So do they draft a rookie quarterback and throw him into the mix, or do they just try to find a veteran out there, whether it be a Sam Darnold or a Aaron Rodgers or somebody like that, and draft the best player available? And then the Giants, who I think most people believe are probably going to take a quarterback, but they'll also sign one in free agency, it sounds like, to start and take a little pressure off whoever they draft at 3. But after that, man, it's a crapshoot. The Patriots, they don't need a quarterback. Drake May showed them last year that he's their guy, and they've got over $120 million in cap room. So this draft's gonna be really interesting. I think there'll be a lot of maneuvering in this draft. And I think if you're a Panther fan or a Falcon fan, you're just going to kind of sit there and just wait and hope that some of these guys last until your pick. I know a guy like Mason Graham, who is the great defensive tackle out of Michigan, would make a perfect partner in crime next to Derek Brown on this Panthers defensive line. A great run stopper. Does a good job of getting pressure on the quarterback. And I doubt he'll be there, but man, he would be a great fit. You've got the Georgia guys with Williams, Walker. To me, the safest pick that a team could take, where the Panthers drafted 8. I think Malachi Starks, the safety from Georgia. If you ask me to give you a lock on top 10 player in this draft that's going to be a Pro Bowler every year, Starks to me is the guy. I think he does everything that you want a safety to do, especially in the game now where they're throwing the ball around the yard. He's good against the run. He can cover the other team's best receiver if he needs to. He hits hard. He's physical. He's fast. To me, he's the safest pick in the top 10 picks of this draft. It doesn't mean he'll be in the top 10 picks of the draft, but if you're picking in that 8, 9, 10 spot, to me, you can take a chance on some of those other guys like Walker, or a James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee, who has some off the field issues that I think are going to scare some people away. Williams. To me, Starks is the safest pick in that group. And I think if you're a team like the Panthers, for instance, who need a safety, you don't want to draft for need necessarily. You want to draft the best player available. And to me, he knocks out both of those. I think he's a need, and I think he's the best player available. So it'll be interesting to see what they do there in those top 10 picks. But the combine has become its own league in itself. 15, 20 years ago, you would read, okay, this guy's 40 time and this guy does this and this guy does that. And now, man, the NFL has done a really good job of extending their season. So the Super Bowl is over a few weeks ago. You saw players this week getting cut already. So teams are trying to position themselves in a good spot when it comes to salary cap or re-signing guys. Free agency starts here in the next 2-3 weeks. But the combine now is a big deal. And there's a reason why ESPN covers it from start to finish for the most part. Every head coach, every general manager, every head of scouting are at this thing, and they all do their interviews at the podium. And not that they're going to say anything, that that's the funny part. None of these guys are going to sit there and really give you an honest evaluation of these guys, because they don't want to give anything away. And you can't blame them. And still watching the combine and even the Senior Bowl, it's fun because you get to see guys that maybe you didn't get to watch every Saturday, guys that you're not familiar with. Maybe they didn't play at Ohio State or Florida or Notre Dame or Penn State or, you name the big teams. they may come from a smaller school, but now you're going to see them showcase their skills, and the Senior Bowl does that, and they do a really good job with that now. And then the combine follows up on that. So I'm excited to watch it. And I know some people are like, man, you really going to sit there and watch these dudes lift weights and see how many times they can press, 225 pounds, or how fast they run the 40, or how they do in the shuttle, or yada, yada, yada. And my answer is, yeah, I do, because I want to know as much as I can about who my team may draft, and not just my team, but any team. I want to know the players. And I've been lucky enough in my history of running sports stations and dealing with professional teams and college teams that I've been around a lot of great players. And it's always been interesting to me to talk to them about their combine experience. And a lot of the guys weren't even invited to the combine. So there's a lot of guys who won't even be there this week that will be drafted in the first or second round, just because of the tape that they put up during the year. And then there's guys like Shador Sanders, who isn't really going to work out much at the combine anyway. We always have that, where there's guys who don't want to run the 40. They don't want to do this. They don't want to do anything that could hurt their draft position. But I'm looking forward to it. And this is what the NFL has done. They've made the NFL a 12-month season. And you have the combine, and then the free agency period, and then the draft. And then really in May is the 1 month where, it's kind of dead. And then you have the mandatory workouts and all that leading into training camp in July. But the NFL has really stretched their program to cover the entire year. And if you're an NFL nut like I am, I can't get enough. I can't get enough. I'll watch every bit of it. So I'm excited about watching the combine this week and seeing, guys that we never heard of that go in there and run a 4.29, or do 35 reps of 225, and are doing things that these guys at these big schools can't even do. And you see these guys that Green from Marshall is a good example of a defensive end who had just a heck of a year in college this year. And you see him popping up, in the first round, early second round, in a lot of mock drafts, and you watch the kid play, and you see why people are getting excited. So it'll be interesting to see, like, a guy like that, how he does in the combine. There's a lot of guys who have made a lot of money in the combines. You don't have to look further than last year with Xavier Worthy from Texas. Runs the fastest 40, I think, in the history of the combine. And then, Kansas City trades up with Buffalo towards the end of the first round to get him. And which leads me to a couple questions: is why does Buffalo keep trading with Kansas City? Buffalo traded with Kansas City when the Chiefs traded up to take Mahomes. They traded with him last year when they traded to get Worthy. So if I'm a Buffalo fan or consultant, stop trading with Kansas City. Just stop it. They don't need your help anymore. You've helped them enough. If you would have kept that pick and Mahomes was never a Chief, you probably would have a Super Bowl championship by now. So leave them alone. They do all right on their own. But yeah, Xavier Worthy was a guy last year that really upped his stock at the combine. And so it'll be interesting to see who does that this year. But that starts Thursday again, Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis. And look, that's a big stadium full of a bunch of kids who have worked their butts off for this opportunity, and know that within the next 2-3 months, they're going to be millionaires. They're all that hard work is going to pay off. And then on the other side of that, there's going to be kids that don't perform well at the combine, who have these big dreams. And we've seen it happen a lot where, they have to take the slide. They think they're going to be a first round pick or a second round pick, and then they slide to the third round or the fourth round. And so we'll see that too. But to me, the drama and the stories that we learned over this week of the combine is always fascinating and fun to see. So we'll pay attention to that, and we'll obviously cover that at the end of this week and next week. And I think you guys will all be watching it as well. So it'll be interesting to know, like, what players are you looking forward to paying attention to. We've got some local kids too who are going to be in the combine who I'm excited to see. But let me know if there's, who you're excited to watch. I named some of the defensive guys there earlier with Abdul Carter and Graham and Williams, Pierce Jr. But like I said, to me, Starks is the guy at 8 for the Panthers. Like, to me, that's you can't miss your first round pick. And the Panthers have had great success picking 8th. And to me, picking 8th takes a lot of pressure off. When you pick first, you got the first pick, man. You pick who you want out of all these players. And if you miss, it sets you back. When you pick 8th, you can kind of go with the best player scenario if you want to. You don't have to try to just fill a hole if you don't want to. And so the Panthers in their history have picked Christian McCaffrey at 8. I think all of us would agree that was a great pick and would love to have somebody that can perform like that this year at number 8. We've taken Luke Kuechly at number 8. So I can just stop right there. And just those two guys, I think that if we can replicate anybody that's even close to the kind of players those guys are or were, then I think we'll all be happy. So to me, I'm not worried about picking 8th. I think it kind of lets the draft come to you a little bit. I think it opens up the opportunity to trade back if they need to. It really just keeps all options on the table. Whereas if you're picking, in the top 2 or 3 picks and you decide to keep that pick, you better nail it. You better nail it. And we've seen way too many times. And luckily not necessarily with the Panthers. The Panthers have had a good track record with first round draft choices over the years. Not so good in second or third round, but they have done a good job of nailing the first round. And so, hopefully this year they do the same. And it all started at the Senior Bowl as far as getting to see these guys play in person and with other players that are on that level. And then we'll see it again in the combine this week. So I'm looking forward to that. And then, like I said, we're getting a lot closer to March Madness. And I don't know if there's a better 3-4 weeks of sports than March Madness. You've got baseball getting cranked up with spring training. NHL is, full gear. NASCAR's full gear. And so luckily you have the draft prep in March, and getting ready for that in April. So I think March is just as good as it gets in sports. And I'm excited about that, as I know a lot of you guys are. And like I said, we'll be in Vegas for March Madness. So we'll do a show from there and we'll do a lot of the handicapping stuff while we're there for that. So we're looking forward to that. But we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back, finish up a few things, and we've got Shannon Spake joining us. She's in Sacramento. The Hornets take on the Kings tonight. Shannon, if you don't know, is the sideline reporter for the Hornets, but she's been a sideline reporter for the NFL with Fox for a long time. She done NASCAR for a long time and still does a podcast for NASCAR. And like I said, in my opinion, she's one of the best there is. And not only that, she's just a really, really good person and a fun person to hang out with. And she gets it, So Shannon will be joining us in the next segment, and we're excited. We'll talk, obviously, the Hornets, a little bit of NBA, and a lot of other things. Shannon has covered a lot of stuff, and she's always great to talk to. So we'll have her coming at you after this.
It's time to suit up. Here's your host, DJ the Suit Stout.
Welcome back to Suit Up Sports. I'm DJ the Suit Stout, and joining me now is Shannon Spake. You might know her from NASCAR coverage, NFL coverage, and now the Hornets coverage. Honestly, in my opinion, one of the best to do it, and she's made a really quick transition to NBA and the Hornets sidelines, and she does a great job. She's in Sacramento, California right now. The Hornets take on the Kings tonight. And Shannon, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, the check is in the mail, DJ. Oh, as always, I appreciate all the kind words for sure.
Well, it's true. So first of all, let's just get this out of the way. Last night, the Hornets were abysmal. Like, how hard is it when you're doing the sidelines and the team is just getting their butt whooped and you're having to figure out what to report from the sidelines? how hard is it to figure out like what you're going to do or who you're going to approach? Because I'm sure all the coaches don't want to talk and the players are mad. Like, how hard is that as a sideline reporter when you're trying to do your job to figure out what you're going to add to the broadcast then?
Yeah, I think I've been doing this long enough to know that in situations like that, you just really, my approach my entire career has been about the human angle, right? These are human beings that are going through emotional times. And yes, I know it's an 82 game season. And yes, I know that there's going to be losses, but obviously a loss like that stings a little deeper for everybody. And so I think that you just have to be very cognizant of that and very respectful. And I think that I've built up enough, I don't know if like stock is the word, but emotional stock maybe, or just FaceTime with the players and the coaches to know that I'm not in there to pour salt in the wound or to make it any different. I have to ask the questions that I have to ask and ask them and kind of get out and be cognizant that the moment is maybe not the time to ask 4 or 5 questions. Maybe it's the time to ask 2 or 3 and just kind of let them get back to the locker room and deal with what they have to deal with.
So when you know that they're gonna cut to you at a certain time, and you're like 5 minutes out of that, and you're sitting there and you're watching whatever game it is, and obviously you're trying to think about what you're going to talk about or who you're going to talk about, in a game when it's just out of hand right away, are you like worried about what you're going to say or what you're going to ask, or are you like, oh no, I just have to ask this, I have to address this, or are you just like, let's just get through this as quick as I can, ask what I need to ask? They are, like you just said, you've got equity with them, they know that you're a professional, and it's got to be tough though.
I don't really get nervous about asking questions anymore. Again, I think that it's about respect, and it's about asking the right questions with the right tone and the right approach. And I know that I can do that just given the fact that I've been doing this for 20 years. Listen, I have, when I was younger and interviewing Tony Stewart when he first got out of the infield care center, or Kurt Busch when he just got out of the infield care center when I was a young reporter, and my heart would be beating out of my, like I could feel it. And I swear to God that the mic could pick it up at the time. And I'd be so nervous, and I'd ask them a question and they would respond with a one word answer. And then I'd be like, I don't know if I can curse on this, but I'd be like, shit, like I got to be ready for the next question, right? Because I wasn't ready for the next question. So those guys, like the Tony Stewarts and the Kurt Busches and the Kyle Bushes and all of those guys, the Kevin Harvicks, when I was a young reporter in NASCAR, doing it every single week and interviewing these guys, by the way, as they get out of a car after they just lost a race, or get out of an infield care center after they just got in a wreck. And those are the moments that are so like raw. When in the NFL, you're interviewing the winner all the time, right? You're always interviewing the guys that win. You don't have I personally, right, from the network side, I didn't go into the press room and interview the guys who lost, who, by the way, had an opportunity to take a shower, kind of decompress, figure out what they're going to say. The emotions are a lot rawer whatever. There's a dog outside my hotel room, in NASCAR, which really was a great base for me to learn how to do all this stuff. And really, just like I said, treat people like people. I mean, I've interviewed Bill Belichick and Nick Saban and coaches that are very unpredictable, John Calipari, who are so unpredictable that you just don't know what they're going to say. And you kind of have to prepare for anything. And that's really, I believe, calloused me in a way that I don't get nervous anymore, because I trust that I'm going to treat them with respect and ask the right question with respect, and they are going to recognize that. And so I never really get nervous about questions. Even with Bill Belichick, I was like, listen, he can say whatever he wants to say to me. I'm just going to keep rolling, and I'm going to just do what I got to do and ask the question, because they're also professionals, DJ. They know that these questions are coming. They know that we have to do it. It's a TV thing. And so, but it is those relationships. It's me talking to Coach Charles Lee and saying, hey, I'm with you 82 games this year. I'm going to have to interview you 82 times after a game, win or loss. If there are things that I can do differently, or approach you differently, or handle differently, then let's talk about that. And those are, I think, the important things those are the non-negotiables in my career, the way that I approach things.
Has there been a moment where, and again, like you said, I mean, you've been doing this for a long time, so Has there been a moment though where you've asked a question, whether it be in NFL or NASCAR or NBA or whatever, where when you asked the question, there was like a moment of silence and you thought to yourself, "Oh my God, like what are they going to say?" Or like, because like people I don't think realize if you've not done it before, when you're doing the job that you do, you're catching people under like high stress or very emotional, like you
Yeah.
said. I mean, during a game,
Yep.
and so it just opens itself up to where you might get a better play. And like you said, you're good enough to understand that it is treating somebody like a person and relating to them and trying to ask them a question that's not trying to throw them under a bus, but also a question that will
Yeah.
be, something that listeners want to tune in for. But has there been a moment where you've asked a question and there was like a moment of silence? You're like, oh God.
All the time, honestly. And I mean, with John Calipari, I got that a lot. And my uncle, it's funny, my uncle calls it like the John Calipari effect, because he said that when I first started covering college basketball, which is a true story, when I first started covering college basketball for ESPN, I knew nothing about college basketball. I had been in the NASCAR world for 5 years, from '07 to 2012. And when you're covering NASCAR, you're so sort of like surrounded by racing. You're there Friday, Saturday, Sunday, so you don't have a lot of
Yeah.
time. And I had young kids, so I didn't have a lot of time for other sports. So I had to learn it on the fly. I remember Bruce Pearl bringing me, he let me watch some film with him and his team, and I got to kind of experience that. But Coach Cal was, he's so unpredictable and so dynamic and so sort of like you have no idea what he's going to say. I would have to box him out all the time. You would ask him a question and he'd be like, well, what do you think about that? And you better know the question that you're asking him. That's one of the things when people ask me, do producers give you the questions that you're going to ask? And I'm like, hell no, because the last thing I want is a producer to give me a question, me ask that question, and then someone go, what do you mean? And I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't know what I mean, because someone just told me to ask this. So absolutely not. I think with and I've mentioned this, like Nick Saban's another one. You always have to be super prepared. You just have to be prepared. You have to when you talk to him during the week, you have to hear what he says and think about the things that he's saying and use those in your questions. Bill Belichick's another one that you just know is not going to give you a lot, so you kind of have to be very patient when you're talking to him. And I do feel like coaches nowadays, as players as well, I feel like they understand that the media is so much like they're not part of the old guard, I should say, of coaches where they're sort of like, salty and give reporters
Yeah.
a hard time. I feel like the new generation of coaches understand that this is part of the job, and they understand that the media side of it is so valuable, and so many players, right, are doing what we're doing right now,
Right.
and
Yeah.
understand the value of that as well, which I think makes the reporter and the analyst and the play-by-plays guy's job a little bit easier, because we are getting a lot more information to tell. They understand that we're telling the stories of the game, and
Yeah.
the only way that we can tell these stories properly is if they give us the information to tell those stories.
Has it been a hard transition doing the NBA and the Hornets, and that's your main focus? I know you do the NASCAR show as well still, and obviously you've been doing NASCAR forever and everybody knows you from that. But has it been a hard transition moving to the NBA?
I would say yes, because first of all, I didn't ever see NBA sort of on my bingo card or on my,
Right.
on my future, list. I covered college basketball from 2012 to 2015. So and you could go back and watch any interview. If people ask me what my favorite sport to cover was, it was always college basketball. I loved the intimacy of it. I loved the fact that there were 5 players on this small court. You could see their faces. You could understand the emotions of it. The coaches added just an incredible dynamic. The environment was so right there. Everything about it I loved. And so when Fox and we parted ways, I mean, and I covered NFL for 8 seasons,
Right.
and that is a incredible, huge production. And now you're moving to a much, I don't want to say smaller in terms of like viewership, but you're in an arena. Whereas, in NFL, it's this, you're dealing with the elements and you're dealing with all of these
Right.
players on the sideline, and there's so many different faces and there's so many different things. And so that was quite the adjustment. Learning the new language, learning the names of not only the players on our team, but the players on other teams. You're
Yeah.
constantly having to say it. And like, I didn't really follow NBA a lot for the last, 8 years or whatever. So I'm sort of like OJT, on job training. I'm learning as I
Yeah.
go. And the coaches here have been super, but I think that I've been doing this for 20 years. I've covered NASCAR, college football, college basketball, NFL. I know how to tell stories. I know how to do interviews, talk to people. I know how to relate to people, and the other stuff will come. And I knew that it would. And it took me, a couple weeks to kind of get up to speed. And yeah, it was quite the adjustment, and it was scary, and it was uncomfortable. But I also think that that's a luxury. 20 years into your career to be pushed into a new space and be uncomfortable. Yeah. That's growth, and that was really exciting for me as well.
Yeah, and look, the Hornets, I know they're struggling this year, but they've got a great young team, and even after the rescinded trade that happened, last week, and all that drama that it's brought on, the Hornets' future, I think, is bright. I've been a Hornets fan going all the way back to day one, and Hornets, Bobcats, back to the Hornets, and but I think they've got a great nucleus, and I think that the new ownership and the new coaching staff, and I mean, they've kind of redid everything there. And so I think that you getting on board this year is a perfect timing for you, because I think it's going up from here. I think this year we'll keep struggling and we'll move on from there, but I think the future's bright for the Hornets.
They are so much fun to watch. They are such a great group. I travel with them. I'm on the bus with them, on the plane with them. The coaching staff, the entire organization from top to bottom could not be cooler. DJ, I've worked some huge games, and I've worked big games with people that are not fun to work with. And we all have, right? We've all been in jobs that are great, and the people that are around us aren't. And how does that equal out? So we're covering the NBA. The team is awesome to watch. The players are so fun to be around. The team is so fun to be around. The coaching staff, Eric Collins, Del Curry, everything we do. And when we start winning, when this team starts winning, when we beat, was it the Spurs? When we beat the Spurs a couple weeks ago, was that the game that was at the Spectrum Center?
Yeah, when Fox hit the three, but it was late, so we hung on to win. Yeah, great game.
Place was insane. And so I haven't experienced this really, especially from my role. And I'm like, this is at the time maybe a 12 or 13 win team, and that place was insane. And I'm thinking to myself, this is a basketball town. When this team starts to win, and even if they don't, they're just so fun to watch. And the people that come out to the Spectrum Center. And honestly, that's another part that's so cool for me, DJ, is that I've lived in Charlotte for 20 years. It's so funny because people are like, how long have you been here? When did you move here? And I'm like, I've been here for 20 years. I've just been part of the national scene. So I fly to a city and I do the game and I come home. And now I'm doing games at home. I got a couple of season tickets so my kids and my boyfriend can come to all the games. They're sitting right there next to me. I see every single night, I see like at least 3 or 4 people that I've known for 20 years from the community. And so to be part of the Charlotte community, a place where I've been here longer than the place that I grew up, Fort Lauderdale. That's so cool to be part of this Charlotte community in a way that I've never been before.
Yeah, I've been going to Hornet games since they since they were created, and my buddies and I would just find any way to get into games. And this is
I got 2 season tickets, so you and Krista can have them anytime you want.
Yeah, if the kids aren't using them, we'll take them. Yeah, so I've been going to Hornet games literally since their inception, and 23,000 a night, and the crowd was crazy, and we weren't winning games. And then I was there when we started to win games. I was there when Alonzo Mourning hit the jump shot against the Celtics to go on to the next round. And so all these great memories I have, and bringing my kids to Hornet games and Bobcat games over the years. And even though they've kind of struggled in the last few years, when we watch the games, we were talking about, like, they still got such a great young nucleus, and the trade getting rescinded, that's tough for both parties. But I'm glad we kept Williams, because I think the kid's a stud. I think he has unlimited potential. He has to stay healthy. And there's certain times where I feel like, he needs to maybe, show a little more effort. And I know on the broadcast, I think it was a couple games ago that was brought up. But yeah, I think the Hornets have a huge upside right now, and they've got draft picks galore. They're going to have some money, and they've got some good young players. Miles Bridges is playing as good as he's ever played for the Hornets right now. Melo, when he's healthy, is always a great player. And so, yeah, I think your timing on that's been great. Let me ask you a question, because I know that you, between NASCAR and football and basketball, you've done it all. But for those of you who don't know, and you probably have seen, Shannon has this deal where she runs the stairs of stadiums or arenas or whatever. So with that being said, what would be the hardest 3 stadiums that you've had to run the stairs and back, whether regardless of weather? Because I'm sure you could say, well, when it was snowing or this or that, but what stadiums were just like, oh my God, I'm not going to make it?
Oh, well, I mean, I'm not going to make it. I think Florida State and the Swamp, were sort of the hardest. I remember Mississippi State had like really like large, they were concrete large steps. So you really had to kind of take a big step. My favorite was Penn State. And I've told this story a couple of times. So it was 7:30 in the morning. It was 30 degrees outside. I was like, there's no way I'm missing this opportunity. And like the stadiums that I would go to, tennis, I've run, I mean, you name it, I think I've run it. Baylor, Texas Tech, USC. I've never done Oregon, so that's not one. Ohio State, Michigan, any college stadium I feel like I've run. I've run every single NFL stadium except for Buffalo and Kansas City. I've done a couple of college, and now I'm getting to do the NBA stadiums. But Penn State, to me, when I ran up to the top of Penn State, I have a picture of it. And it was 7:30 in the morning, and I stood up there and I realized that I was the only human being in this entire stadium. And that was, it kind of moved me. LSU was another one. I actually did that during basketball season. So the field wasn't even painted. So it didn't even look like LSU. It was this weird kind of, it was just very strange. And so people always ask me why I do it. And I say, because I feel like I can. And if I don't, then I'm missing this amazing opportunity to have this experience to run these stadium stairs. And I almost feel like I owe it to these places to do it. And so it's been really, really cool. So I've done 55 different stadiums since 2014. Brock Heward was the one that got me to do it. We were at Tennessee and he's like, hey, you want to run stadium stairs? It was in 2014. And I was like, yeah, sure, let's do it. And I was hooked ever since. So
yeah, no, it's cool. I love watching it. And you always seem to have your great pace. And Krista obviously is a runner like you are. And she's like, she just goes right up and down those stairs. Like,
well,
no
Krista
problem.
and I have definitely had our mornings after with trying to work out. And when we were much younger, we would be like, okay, I've known DJ's wife, so my gosh, since 2003, 2004. So for 20 something years. And we had a lot of mornings where we were like, we're working out this morning, even though we're struggling and hurting really bad.
Yeah, we always say that Krista's like a Navy SEAL. Like she can be out till like 4 a.m, hanging out, partying, and then at 5 a.m, she's running 6 miles
I swear,
in the 20-degree weather. Like y'all are nuts. I don't know how you do it.
It's gonna hit her eventually. When she gets to my age, she's gonna be like, yeah, I'm not gonna do that this morning.
Well, she
I should say, DJ.
Yeah, I'm older than you, I'm sure. She today said that she raced our nephew, and she thinks she pulled her hamstring. And I'm like, that could be the first sign.
I had to have surgery doing sprints against a 12-year-old. So, yes, please.
Really?
Be careful. Oh yeah. I was coaching my kids' cross country team, and and I was complete. Everyone's like, "Were you warmed up?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm a triathlete. I've done 4 marathons and 7 Ironmans. Yes, I was warmed up. We were running everything." And the coach was like, "Hey, we're gonna do 4x100 sprints. Can you be the 4th?" And I was like, "Sure." I was like, "All right." So I grabbed the baton from the kid. I took off, and poof, bing. I mean, it was the worst feeling in the whole wide world, but in retrospect, I think that having that injury has allowed me, and I always try to find like a silver lining, or like how is this lesson going to make me better? I do think it's helped me relate to some of the players that I cover in terms of like the injuries that they have, because that was a big one. I was non-weight bearing for 6 weeks on crutches
Wow.
and huge surgery, PTSD, all that stuff. And so I think it's helped me relate to some of the players that it was not fun at all. I will no longer be doing sprints. You will never see me running fast ever.
Yeah, I mean, I'm coming off 2 back surgeries, and before the back surgeries, I decided to try pickleball. And my buddy's like, "You got to try pickleball. You'll be great at it, blah blah blah." So I go play, and like the second set, I tear my calf muscle.
Oh yeah.
And I couldn't get through it. Like normally, I'm tough, and I'll get through it. And I'm good. And like the next ball, I made like a move for it, and I'm like, "Nope, it's over. I think my whole athletic career is done." And when I went to the doctor, they said that pickleball is the #1 sport for keeping them rich, basically. they see more people off of pickleball.
Yes, because people, like, we all think we're young and we can still do all this stuff. And we can't. Like, we just can't. We can't. And your leg slips and, don't even get me started. Like, I'm a strict consistent. I still run. I still work out. I do all that stuff. I don't know if I'll get back to the triathlon. I don't know if I'll do that again. It was a great 10-year span. I'd like to do another marathon. I'd like to do New York at least one more time. So we'll see.
That's awesome. Let me ask you a few questions before we let you go. First of all, out of all the coaches you've interviewed, and there's a lot of them across, or NASCAR guys or whatever, not just coaches, if you could pick like 2 or 3 to have a beer with, who would they be?
Mike Bray from Notre Dame, #1 for sure.
Yep.
Bill Self is another cool one that I'd love to have a beer with. And these are all college basketball, so I got to think about something else. Oh my God, that's if I even think about NFL. Kyle Shanahan was really cool. Oh, Mike McDaniels from like Miami.
He seems like, and that's your team too, so I could see that. But he seems like he just would be a fun dude.
Some of the stuff he says when he walks into the meetings, he'll like walk into the meeting and he'll be like, "So, are we here to talk about how much tall people suck?" And you're just like, "What?" That's how he starts the meeting, and you're just like, "Okay, this is gonna be fun." So my favorite, so that's so impossible to answer. Billy Donovan was my favorite coach for a really long time. I've been able to see him now since he's like at the Bulls and share some stories about how pivotal he was in my career at such a young age. Jay Wright is honestly one of my favorite human beings. Mike Bray, I love the dude. I still talk to him. He's at the Hawks now, but my dad is in Indiana, and he treats my dad so well. Just such a great guy. Who else? So I'm thinking, you thinking NASCAR?
Well, I'll ask you this about NASCAR.
Jeff Gordon from NASCAR. If you're going to have a drink, like Jeff Gordon is the coolest of the coolest. Ryan Blaney's another one that's really a cool dude. So we're talking college football. Who from college football? Oof, this is college football.
Put me on the spot.
Yeah, Cliff Kingsbury was cool. I always like, but did he drink White Claw? Isn't that the joke? Like he drinks White Claw. Gosh, and I'm leaving someone out, so you have put me on the spot because I'm like trying to think.
Well, let me ask you this. I'm going to put you on the spot again. So, out of all the, obviously NASCAR, you know that as well as anybody. If you had to pick 1 or 2 drivers to drive you through a life or death situation, out of all the drivers you've dealt with, and them not just from an interview standpoint, but you live at the lake and the drivers. If you had to pick 1 or 2 guys to drive you through a like life or death situation, who you taking?
Past or present, like current?
Yeah, whatever. Whatever you want. Christopher Bell won the race today, so we'll take him out of the equation. But anyone else besides that?
So I think Joey Logano is one of my favorites and my kid's favorite. I love Joey and my kids love Joey. So he'd be one. I just mentioned Jeff because I think he's obviously one of the greatest. And Jimmy. I love Jimmy Johnson.
Yeah.
I don't love Jimmy Johnson. He's like the great. I mean, I've been in situations before where you know how like you meet somebody and you're like, are they really that nice? Like, are they just that way just because of whatever? And then you're like, bro, he's really that nice. So I think Jimmy. Yeah.
it was good to see him get a top 5 last week in the Daytona 500. And, I love NASCAR. You love NASCAR. But is it one of the things about NASCAR that's driving me crazy now? And it's been this way for a little while. And I know a lot of the drivers complain about it, but it seems like you're going to win the race if you just hang around 8 or 10 or 12 and just wait for the first guys to wreck, the top 3 or 4 guys. And, almost every race, especially the ones where you're drafting or the super speedways. And so we started a NASCAR league this year, and I had some buddies of mine who don't really follow NASCAR come into it. Football's over, so they need something to watch on Sundays. So we gamble on it, and they get a random driver or whatever. And they're asking me, like, so really, should I just watch the races, like the last 5 laps? Because my guy's in first place for this long or that long, and then there's a wreck and whatever. And I know, Denny Hamlin's talked about this, and a lot of guys have been outspoken about today. There was a big wreck. Ryan Blaney, you talk about Blaney, he got wiped out. And, it seems to me like NASCAR has done a lot to try to get popular with the new generation. I mean, look, NASCAR had its peak, and then it went down for a while. Well, I think they're coming back now. I think they're letting the guys race harder. I think the young kids that are in there now all have, good personalities and whatever. And so I think it's on the verge of coming back. But man, they got to figure something out where every race is like the last 5 or 10 laps, and if you're up front, you're done.
Yeah, I don't like, honestly, I hear what you're saying. I do. I think let me address the whole, like, NASCAR was gone and now it's not. I think that people consume sports differently now than they ever did. And
No
so
doubt.
I think the experience of NASCAR is something, right, where it's a weekend experience. The races are really long. If you don't understand NASCAR, because I remember when I first started covering racing, I didn't understand NASCAR. So if you don't understand it, if you've never been to it, that's the key. Go to it. You'll get hooked. The whole experience of seeing it and doing it. I think that it's never going to be the 90s ever again, but nothing's going to be the 90s ever again.
Right.
It's just not. Sports, we consume everything differently. News, we don't watch the
Music,
whatever nightly with whomever. Everything is consumed differently. And so I think that you have to also think about that with racing. And I think that if you have a race where you don't have these dramatic moments, then people are going to say, the race was boring. And if you have racing that's points racing, people are going to be like, if you have the championship based on what Matt Kenseth won or whoever won back in the day, it's like, why are we points racing again? We want something that's more dramatic. So they created these stages and they created these moments to create more drama. And do you want more wrecks? As I get older, I have a harder time with that because I know these drivers, I know their families, and I know how dangerous it is. But I mean, that's what people also want to see, is because they're doing things that we can't, right? And they're superheroes. They're in these wrecks and walk away, and they're doing these incredible things. So I don't know where the balance is. I don't know if anyone will ever truly kind of be happy with where it is. But I don't think the last 2 races is a great example of how the rest of the season is going to go, because you have Daytona, which is always going to be a wild card. There's always going to be a wreck at the end. It is absolutely a case of survival, 1000%. Everybody knows that. Same with Talladega. And Atlanta has turned into a super speedway as well, so that creates the same kind of thing. So I don't tell your buddies, the last 2 races, not a great example. When we go to Phoenix and we go to Las Vegas and we go to some of these places that are a little less unpredictable and the super speedway-esque sort of element isn't there, I think that there's going to be, fuel mileage. And then it's like, fuel mileage, why are we doing fuel mileage? And there's going to be this. It's like, I don't know. I think exciting racing, I think people do not remember the entire race if there's an exciting finish. We don't remember what the Atlanta race looked like last year because we know what the finish looked like. And that finish was created because of that super speedway type of racing. So I don't know what to do to make everyone happy.
Well, I agree with you. And I think that the wrecks aren't a bad thing. I mean, listen, last week on the Daytona 500, Fox was even promoting, when's the big one coming? We know there's going to be the big one. So, people understand that that's why people are tuning in to some extent. Right. And, it's like I told my buddies who are just kind of trying to get back into NASCAR. I'm like, name a sport, NBA. A lot of people go, you don't have to watch the NBA till the 4th quarter. Golf, watch the back 9. So I don't think it's uncommon that, even soccer, Yeah. So you know, the action happens at the end of the game, right? And that's in any sport. I just like the fact that
Very valid point.
yeah, and I like the fact that NASCAR's letting these guys bang again and talk crap to each other and make it, you know, there's animosity. And you know, I love watching these interviews now after a wreck. Even Joey Logano, who you mentioned, who's, you know, my favorite driver as well, and last week at the Daytona 500, after that whole, I've been watching every interview this week about every driver that was involved or not involved, and everybody has an opinion. And
Yeah.
you know, that keeps NASCAR in the news for the week. So I'm fine with it. I think it's great.
Say it, but they all hate it unless they win.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've been covering this for a really long time, and with all due respect, they all don't. And the guys that, I mean, no one likes super speedway racing. No one does unless they win, and that's
Yeah.
how a lot of it is, right? No one likes, you know, some people like short track racing. That was so much fun, especially if they win. But it certainly was super speedway racing because there's, and I couldn't imagine being a wife or a mother or whatever, like watching my loved one out there, because it is so volatile. And as I've gotten older, I realized that. But I was the first one. I think I said this on NASCAR Daily recently. I was the first one to be like, oh my God, there's a huge wreck. There was a huge shot. There was a shot, and it was just so, like, it just stuck out to me of the car flying through the air. It was Chris Buescher. It was I'm sorry, I'm just like
Plesy or Ryan. Yeah.
So sorry. Yeah. I'm trying to go back and forth between racing and
I know I'm bringing you all over the place.
It's all right. With Ryan Preece going through the air, and there were some guys on the hauler that with their arms just up like this, because that's what they want to see. That's why they're there. That's part of the show. And you know, and then you hear his comments afterwards about his daughter and hearing like the silence, safety, and all that stuff. And the reality of what's really happening sets in. I don't know where that balance is, especially with speedway racing, because people do love the drama, but they're also, you know, it's the danger as well.
Yeah, and listen, people are showing up. Daytona 500 was sold out, and Atlanta had a great crowd today. So I think that NASCAR is on to something. I think they had a lot of work to do. I mean, for a while there, you know, when they were losing a lot of the guys you mentioned, you know, when Jeff Gordon retired and Jimmy Johnson retired, and you know, but I think they're and I think they've got a lot of next guys up right now. I mean, you know, every week when you're looking at the race and you're trying to figure out who's going to win, and obviously now manufacturers have a big deal with it, and your teammates have a big deal. Like, it's changed so much in the last 10 years in particular. But I think they're on the right track, and
a lot of that. It allowed teams like Trackhouse Racing to come in and start competing immediately, which was really, really good. And so that helped a lot with sort of leveling the playing field, because you had these super teams for so long, whether it be Hendrick or Roush or Toyota or with Joe Gibbs Racing. And so then there was this a lot more ability to compete. And so that was, and then you get guys like Ross Chastain, who are so cool and so dynamic and even today watching Carson Hocevar, who these kids are, you know, listen, there's going to be a lot of things that he does on the track that people are not happy with, especially veterans. But at the same time, don't tell me that Kevin or Greg or anybody that was in that position as a young rookie to make their name wouldn't have made a similar move. That doesn't mean that those guys can't go up and confront him and say, whoa it back. Like, you got to chill out, young grasshopper. You know what I'm saying? But they would make the same moves to win a race and to secure a job.
100%. And you know, it's funny because Hocevar last year kind of became my favorite guy, and he was rookie of the year, but he also ticked off everybody. But I kind of liked it. You know, he came from Michigan. He didn't care about any of this stuff. And even today, after the big wreck, you know, with Blaney was like trying to not really give Hocevar too much crap, but he was like, like, and you just said it. He was like, just calm down a little bit and be patient. You know, just calm down, you know. But you're right. When you're a young kid and you're in there, and I love it. And I think that's what's going to bring people back, is a guy like that. This dude's a wild card. He wants to win the damn race, you know.
Carson, so he came into Race Hub when they were announcing his first Cup start. And so he was going to be a Cup driver. So, you know, sometimes some of those drivers, if they were in the Xfinity or Truck Series, they'd come in, they'd be wearing like baggy pants or shorts or something. And so he comes in with dress pants on. But because he's so tall, the dress pants were so short when he sat down, DJ, they came up so high that you could see his socks. And he's just like, he was just he's 19 years old,
Yeah.
and you're just like, oh my gosh. And he's trying to pull his pants down because you see, like, I mean, they're all the way up to his calf. Poor he's like 6'5", and but I'm a big fan of his. I think he's a good kid. Every time I've been around him, I'm just really impressed. And I think he's got a lot of talent. And, and you just have to balance between how aggressive do I want to be to make my name, but also, not ruffle feathers so that I can be here for the long game.
Yeah. Have you ever driven a NASCAR around the track? Like, I'm sure of all the tracks you've been to, have you ever got behind the wheel and been able to drive around, like whether it be the Jeff Gordon driving school or Richard Petty driving school, which is what I did, but have you ever done that?
Yeah, I did it in Daytona. I don't remember what year it was, and I hated it every single time. And I got out of the car. I do not have that adrenaline chip. It's so funny because Jamie Little was in the car and she's just like, ah! And like, I'm like, ah! I hated every second of it. And so they knew that so like you're driving, and I know you experienced this. So the car in front of you, the pace car, either has like a red light or a green light to tell you to go faster or slower. Well, it was green the entire time because I think I was going 70 around Daytona, which I go faster on 77. And so they were like, we could tell you didn't like it. I was like, ugh. And they're like, let me take you for a ride. So I was actually just talking to my boyfriend Lee about this the other day. I didn't hate doing a ride around at Daytona. I hate doing ride arounds. I've done it at Charlotte with Casey Kane, hated it because the whole concept of them driving into that turn, going like 100 miles an hour, not brake, it just freaks me out.
Yeah.
Michael Waltrip at Bristol, I feel like I did. I did a ride around at Fontana one time. I don't know who was driving that car. I know that I definitely was in a car with Jeff Gordon one time. I actually, with Travis Pastrana, was in a rally car with him one time. No helmet in a parking lot, which was not a good idea, especially with Travis. But yes, I've done a lot of those crazy things, and I'm like, all right, let's just do it because it's for the TV. Like,
well,
what can go wrong? The camera's rolling.
Well, you nailed it though. Like when I did it, I did 8 laps, and I'm not kidding. Like after the 4th lap, I was so mentally drained. I'm like, dude, how many more laps? Like, I'm done. Like I'm focusing so much, and every time you go in the corner, I'm like, man, if a tire blows out, I'm going right into this wall. Like I was mentally done after 4 laps. I'm like, just get me out of here, And but let's finish with the Hornets. You're in Sacramento, play the Kings. They made a huge trade before the deadline with Fox. Hornets made a couple trades. One of them obviously didn't go through, but Sacramento's been around 500 since that trade, so they really have been kind of the same team. They had a coaching change during the year. What Hornets last night, obviously, let's just wipe that away. We're not even going to count that. No one saw it. Never happened. Game before that, I think everyone in Charlotte was totally rooting for us to beat the Lakers. I mean, after that whole trade debacle, I mean, even buddies of mine that haven't watched the Hornets in years were like, oh no, we better beat the Lakers tonight, and we did, which is great. So you kind of expected a letdown, in Portland, not that kind of letdown, but whatever. But Sacramento, good team, and some new talent. What are you thinking tonight against the Kings?
Well, I think it depends on who's. Well, actually, it's funny. I don't even think it depends on who's starting anymore because I do think that Charles Lee has. It's so fun. Like earlier in the year, I would be sitting at practice or shoot around. I'd be like, oh my God, who's going to play? Like, who do we have? And now because there are guys on, whether it be 10-day contracts or two-way players that they picked up, there's so many guys at practice and so many guys that have sort of come on and been able to get these minutes and go through things. And Coach Lee has been able to see them in certain situations that I think has allowed him to, I think it's a little more comfortable than just kind of going, oh my gosh, who's going to be here? Like, I think Moussa Diabate has been such a I love Nurkic. I think that he is, oh my gosh. I know he hasn't played in a bit, so I know he's still getting up to speed. He's still learning the system, all that stuff. I just think he is a stud, and I cannot wait to see him.
He's been great.
Oh my gosh, he's so fun to watch and just a great dude too. Just I think Del Curry said it perfectly. Like, he's just playing with joy again. And I can see that I see him when the cameras are off. Right. And I can see that. I just think he's a really, really cool dude. And I'm so excited to see what he can do with this team. It's, LaMelo plays, the team is completely different. The pace that he creates and the moves that he creates and the way that they have to defend him opens so many more guys up. Josh Green was hitting offensively the other night, which opens a lot more up. It's just it was a worst case scenario night against Portland for the Hornets, and it was best case scenario for Portland. I mean, they could not miss from
They
three.
did not miss. Yeah.
It was that ball went in the air and it was going in. It was insane to watch. And so I think that you have to flush that. I think you have to move forward. And I think that's the biggest thing. And we're on this 6-game road trip. And so we're halfway through. We have Sacramento, Golden State, and Dallas. We had Lakers. I don't even know where we are. Denver. And then obviously Portland game. So it's a long road trip. It's a long season. I've learned that. That's, I think, one of the things that I've had to adjust to, right? From coming from the college football world where every game is important. NASCAR, where you win, you're in. NFL, every game is important. In an 82-game season, it's just a little more. Yeah, it's just, hey, it's 82
One
games.
loss doesn't. Yeah, one loss is the end of the world.
We've got 84 more. We got 80 more games. We got 70 more games. So that whole mindset of it being a lot longer has been something that I've had to kind of adjust to. But like I said, the team plays really hard. You never get the sense that they walk into a game not thinking they can win, not thinking that they're play really hard. Coach Lee, I can see, I've been able to watch it sort of evolve over the season when he first came in and he's sort of setting these, the what is the tone and what are the sort of the foundation, the fundamentals that I'm setting. And I see those kind of playing out. And it's been really interesting to see from my perspective.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, no one's expecting them to do much this year anyway. And so now we're kind of just wanting the Cooper flag or
Brandon's out. LaMelo, is dealing with his issues. Trey Mann, who at the time, and we were all
he was playing unbelievable. Like losing him was a huge
we were like
loss.
writing it out, right? And so and then Mark had his issues early on. So, Nick Richards was awesome, but then Musa came on. So I just think there's been so many moving parts. And we go to some of these teams that have these 5 guys, 1 guy off the bench, that are just veterans that have been there forever, that are doing it forever. And you just realize the dynamic of this team is very different, but they're so fun. They fight. They play so hard. I feel like, with the exception of what we saw the other night, they're in every single. I mean, even at Denver, they had an answer for every single run that Denver had. It was
without Melo and without. I mean, they played their butts off. Yeah.
They did. And you see that. So even the Lakers, when the Lakers came into town, I think the Hornets were down like 20 in the first quarter and they came back and it was within a couple of points. And so you just never know what's going to happen. Don't ever turn the TV off because you never know what's going to happen. Even the other night against Portland, I was like, oh yeah, it's not over. Like it's not over. Even though they were down, they've gone into the locker room down 25-30 before and come back and gotten it with a couple of points. And so, it's been a lot of fun and a great learning experience for me to be part of this team.
Yeah, well, you're doing a great job. And I'll tell you, as far as the Hornets go, it's they're due to have a ping pong ball go their way. They've had so many times where they've gotten robbed. So maybe this year they get lucky, and whether it's the Cooper flag, which everybody wants, but really the top 3 or 4 picks in this draft all could be really good players. So hopefully they get lucky on the ping pong ball, and hopefully they play well in Sacramento. And thank you so much for joining me. I know that you've got other things you could be doing, like maybe running arena stairs or calling your twin sons or your boyfriend or whatever.
At 3 a.m. last night. And so today was an off day. And I literally sat in this bed and watched the race and just chilled all day. We play Sacramento tomorrow, and then we drive to Golden State, which I'm excited about because I've never seen Steph Curry, I should say, play in person. So I'm really excited. No, never. And so I'm excited to see him play on his home court. And obviously working with Dell will be, with Seth and Steph playing on the same teams. That'll be such a cool thing. But but I've never seen him play in person. And so I'm excited to see that. And then we go to Dallas, and Dallas has been an interesting place as of late.
Oh my
So,
goodness, you ain't
uh,
lying.
and then we go home, which, this is a long, long home stretch, but
Yeah.
it's, it's been such a fun experience, like I said, to do something different this far into my career and
Yeah.
experience something new and something that I never thought I would experience is quite the blessing.
Well, like I said, you're doing a great job. And I tell you, Dell, when he played for the Hornets and even when he went to the Raptors, I used to have a travel softball team that I would do with my radio station, WFNZ, and we were loaded. And Dell was our shortstop. So it was always during the off season. So Dell would come back from wherever he was playing, whether it be Charlotte or Toronto, and he was our shortstop. And, a lot of people don't know that Dell was also drafted in baseball. I want to say like in the 8th round or something, I think by the Baltimore Orioles. Just a lot of those guys that you deal with are just crazy athletes, right? In any sport. And so Dell is our shortstop. And, if we needed a home run, we say, hey, Dell, we needed to hit one here, and he'd hit one. And if we needed a great, he was just, and the kids would be there, and they were like 3 and 4 years old, and they'd be, throwing football or baseball or whatever. And so, whenever I got the first time I brought my kids to see Steph play and tell them kind of like, you probably don't remember this, you guys were little, but Dell was our shortstop and was pretty good softball player, and they can't believe that he was good at like 2 sports. I'm like, oh no, he was really good at 2 sports. I don't know if Steph was, because Steph probably just focused on basketball. Seth probably focused on basketball.
It's funny because who was I? So we had Casey Rivers recently. He was on the desk with me, and he was talking about how back in the day he grew up with the Currys, and Dell would be their pitcher and would always throw. So that's funny that you brought that up. So I do believe that the boys played baseball as well.
It was great. And I'll tell you, and I've learned this, and you see this too, again, with a lot of the professional athletes that you've dealt with. And I've seen it too. It doesn't matter what they're playing. It could be, in Dell's case, basketball, but it could be horseshoes, cornhole, pool, darts. They take it so serious, and they're so competitive, and they hate to lose. And it literally is a whole different level of that. So when we would be playing, we were good, but if we were kind of dogging it the first couple innings, Dell, who I never really thought was going to be a guy that would come and grab something, come on, let's go, let's wake up. He was that kind of guy, and that's a lot of those professional athletes. They just hate to lose, and they're good at a lot of things. And so that's awesome. You're going to get to see Steph at home. And since they've got Jimmy Butler, they've been playing great ball too. So we're probably catching them at the wrong time, but that's going to be great. You get to see that.
Well, listen, I've said this a million times. The thing I love most about my job is I get to see human beings that are they're better at this than anybody else in the entire world, right? This is like, when I watched, I feel like the first time I ever experienced like this sort of like, to quote Oprah, is like this aha moment. I was watching Drew Brees, and I'm 15 feet from Drew Brees, and I'm watching him in the huddle. And I know you know this, like how he leans into the huddle with sort of his one leg out, and he's leaned down on the one leg. And I'm 15 feet away from this, and I'm watching this. And I think that's when I was like, I'm watching, it's like watching, I don't know, like watching John Lennon,
Picasso
right?
paint or something. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Like they're watching Tom Brady, watching Bill Belichick, watching these athletes who are better at that than any other human being. And I get a front row seat for it. So when people ask me, like, what's your favorite sport to cover? I'm like, it's not about the sport. It's about the fact that I get to see these athletic specimens, like these human beings that are so athletically gifted at what they do. And I get to watch Steph Curry hit this shot, or LaMelo Ball do what he does, or whether it be in football or NFL or whatever, NASCAR, Kyle Larson put his car in a place where no one else can put that car and do these crazy things with it. I get to see that from a front row seat. And to me, that is the best part of my job. It's not about, going to these cities or being in these venues or experiencing these. It's watching these athletes do what, like, better than any human being in the world do. And that's the coolest thing.
Well, thank you again.
That's why I love it. That's why I love sports.
Well, and that's why you're
know?
good at it, because you love your job, right? I mean, you're so,
Yeah.
there's not a lot of people that can say they love their job, and you love your job, and you're doing a great job with the NBA. And I still hope they get you back on football, because again, just my opinion, but I don't think there was a better sideline reporter than you. And I mean that. And there's some good ones, so I'm not taking anything away from others, but I think you were, and I've told you this for years, but I hope you get back on the football sidelines as well. But if not, you're still doing great with NBA and NASCAR, and look forward to seeing you soon. I know Krista, who's probably like in the other room right now, eavesdropping and want me to ask you some question about her. Like, yeah, who is your best looking bridesmaid?
Me.
There you go.
I was not. I was like 20 something years old and bloated probably. And
whatever.
Krista was a beautiful bride.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
For a very long time. So
no, you have. Thank you so much, and enjoy the game tonight against the Kings. Hopefully we pull one out, and we'll see you when you get back to Charlotte.
All right.
Thanks, Shannon.
Of course.
Welcome back to Suit Up Sports. I'm DJ the Suit Stout. Thank you for joining us. Thank you also to Shannon Spake for joining us from Sacramento, California, where the Hornets are getting ready to take on the Sacramento Kings tonight. Like I said earlier, Shannon's one of the best in the business to do it. And whether it's NFL, college, and now the NBA, she always knocks it out of the park. So we appreciate her taking some time and joining us. A little bit of time left in the show today, and I wanted to touch on something that I found pretty interesting. I heard somebody mention this last week, and I can't even remember where I read it or heard it, but with all this talk right now about conference realignment, you hear people talking about even the ACC locally that Carolina and Clemson in particular have talked about leaving or realignment or something, right? It's still kind of a gray area of what actually is being discussed. No one's denying that there's something being discussed, and there's rumors of super conferences and all these things. And obviously everything revolves around money. And even with the conferences, the way they're aligned right now, it's kind of crazy. Imagine being a team like Oregon or Stanford or Cal, who have to travel all over the United States to play conference games. And the idea that I heard thrown out there that I'd never heard before was, what if each sport created its own conference? Meaning that basketball, then let's just take the Tar Heels. Let's say that their basketball team is a part of a conference that's just for basketball. The football team, part of a conference just for football. Same with baseball and so on and so forth. As you get into more of the Olympic style sports, I think this process would probably look a little different, and probably be a little easier to put together by region. But even doing it by sport, you could come up with some crazy competitive conferences. You could save money by the lack of travel that they would now have to endure. And man, some of these matchups would be nuts. I did some homework and put together some that I thought would be pretty strong. Imagine if in football, for instance, you had an Atlantic Power Conference, for lack of a better title, that was a mix of ACC, SEC teams, all within the same region for the most part. And you would have a football conference that would consist of Florida State, Clemson, Miami, Georgia, Alabama, Auburn, LSU, Tennessee, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia Tech. Again, I'll say that one more time in football: Florida State, Clemson, Miami, Georgia, Alabama, Auburn, LSU, Tennessee, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia Tech. Could you imagine a conference in football where you have those teams? Now, if that was something that happened, first of all, North Carolina is going to have to really, really hope that Bill Belichick gets in there and does a good job and creates a powerhouse football team. I think he is going to do a good job. But if you're going into a conference like that where you're having to play Alabama and Auburn and LSU and Georgia and so on and so forth, you better come in there strong. Florida State, they would have to they better get back on the right track as well. Even a team like South Carolina now, who is totally on the up, and had a great year last year and has had a heck of a offseason from a recruiting standpoint, a portal standpoint. But man, could you imagine that conference? And again, your longest trip to play would be an easy flight, and in some cases a drive. Midwest, you could have Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State, Penn State, Wisconsin, Iowa, Nebraska, Notre Dame, Minnesota, and Illinois. So a couple things there. Number one, Notre Dame would have to agree to become part of a conference. I'm a Notre Dame fan, so I don't know if that's ever going to happen with the way the money and the TV deal is, but at some point, I think the NCAA could probably squeeze Notre Dame a little harder when it comes to forcing them to get in the conference and having the option to go football one and basketball one, kind of like what they do now. They play an ACC schedule for the most part. And so that's one thing that would have to change. You don't lose any of the rivalries between Ohio State and Michigan, Michigan State, Penn State, Wisconsin, Iowa. And then even at the bottom of that with Minnesota and Illinois is coming off a great year. And they look to be in a position this year to be back in that same spot. They're going to be good. And Minnesota is always at least a tough team. But man, you could go to the Southwest where you have Texas A&M, Oklahoma State, TCU, Baylor, Arkansas, Missouri, Texas Tech, and Kansas State. Again, just unbelievable competitive matchups, and the travel would be reduced by a lot. So not only would these schools be making more money due to this new conference alliance, obviously that would be the main reason they would do it, but they would be saving money by the lack of travel that they would have to do compared to what they are doing now. Go down to Northeast. You'd also have, Pacific. You would have USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington, Stanford, Cal, Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado. We can keep going through the Northeast where you'd have Boston College, Syracuse, Pittsburgh, Maryland, Rutgers, West Virginia, UConn, Duke, and Wake Forest. Again, I think if you do this, there's a few different things, or there's more than a few, but a few of the things that you're going to have to take into account when you're putting these together is the competitiveness of it, the money, the travel, and things like that. So that's why I think Duke, Wake Forest would be more of in the Northeast, just because I think the teams with BC, Syracuse, Pitt, Maryland, Rutgers, West Virginia, UConn, would be a better fit for those football schools. And then you could keep going down to the Southeast, Midwest, and West with Boise State, San Diego State, Fresno State, Oregon State, Washington State. So to me, again, never hearing anyone throw that idea out before, and maybe I've just been under a rock, but I've not heard the idea. And when I started looking into it, man, I don't see why they wouldn't consider this. I'm sure there's plenty of reasons that they could inform me as to why, but on paper, it looks pretty doggone good. And then college basketball. So, we're all used to the ACC being a great basketball conference, has been forever until this year. Now, they'll have 3 teams in the tournament, most likely. At best, I would say 4. SEC, is always known as a great football conference, but now they are the best basketball conference. You can't go a few, 2 or 3 spots down the top 25 in college basketball without seeing an SEC school. And obviously number 1 team in the country, Auburn. So now merging these just on a basketball standpoint, you would have Duke, Carolina, Kentucky, UConn, Syracuse, Villanova, Virginia, Louisville, Michigan State, and Purdue. Midwest would be Kansas, Indiana, Illinois, Ohio State, Wisconsin, Iowa State, Xavier, Marquette, Butler, and Creighton. And then the West Coast would be UCLA, Arizona, Gonzaga, Oregon, Stanford, Washington, San Diego State, Utah, Colorado. And then you'd have a Southern basketball conference with Alabama, Tennessee, Texas A&M, Arkansas, Auburn, Baylor, Houston, Florida, and Miami. So total different look in that conference than what we saw in football. But again, some of these basketball matchups, Duke and Carolina have played Kentucky pretty consistent, I guess, over the last 5-6 years, it seems like. But could you imagine having a home, home and home with those guys every year? UConn, back-to-back national championships, down a little bit this year, but Syracuse is also down, but usually a perennial NCAA team. Villanova kind of, in the middle from where they used to be. They're not great. They're not bad. They're solid. Virginia's down right now, but usually a solid team. And then Louisville and Michigan State and Purdue, all three teams playing great basketball. So it would be a pretty interesting concept if they did let each sport break into separate conferences. We could go through baseball and all that, soccer, but like I said, a lot of the Olympic style sports minus basketball, I think you could have a little different look on this. But football and basketball would be pretty doggone hard to beat if they could do this. Now, do I think that the chancellors at these colleges and the NCAA and all those folks would be able to get on the same page to do this? I don't, unfortunately, because there's so many things that would be involved, money being the main one. Then you've got the obstacle of getting out of the conference you're currently in. We saw last year, Clemson and Florida State were looking into, getting out of the ACC. Florida State took it, I think, further than Clemson did, but without any luck as of now. The penalties and the fines and all those things that go along with it, I guess, were just too much to handle as of now. So I do think it would be really, really hard to get these teams on the same page from a financial standpoint and all that. But man, if they could, it would just be unbelievable. College basketball this year, to me, is as competitive as it's been in a long time. I've enjoyed the college basketball product this year more than I have in 5-10 years. And to me, it's just a much better product than we've seen. And that is even with the one and dones, the portal. Think about that what you may, but it's certainly made teams more competitive. We discussed this earlier, and there's some teams that are gonna really just focus on the portal for their players, especially in basketball, like Rick Pitino and what he's doing at St. John's. And then there's certain teams that are gonna go heavily after the high school kids, and add in a couple portal guys like a Duke, Carolina. Both those teams are good examples of teams that have top 5 or 10 recruiting classes in basketball every year, and are throwing on 2 or 3 guys from the portal to kind of round their team out, but still, heavily driven by freshmen. Duke this year is the only top 20 team in the country, I believe, that has 3 freshmen getting starter minutes. I think there's not even one closer than just 1 freshman. So Duke obviously is pretty freshman loaded, and then we'll lose those 3 guys. They'll lose those 3 guys after this season. So they're going to have to keep filling them back up with high school kids, and then rounding the roster off with the portal. And so that's changed the game quite a bit. So maybe under the new landscape that is that, and the NIL, which still there's a lot to be figured out on that. There's no way that the NIL/portal system that's in place right now is the same system that'll be there in 3 years, 5 years. Something's got to be done. It is the Wild West. I've mentioned this before. I've deal with NIL and have helped and been involved in some of those negotiations, and it truly is unbelievable. Every state has different laws, and it's just nuts. It's the Wild West. So I don't know what the answer is going to be to that, but somebody's going to have to rein that in, because it's just out of control. So whether it's players signing contracts that keep them out of school for 2 years, 3 years, because a lot of these coaches even are saying that, Rick Pitino, I'll use him as another example, that even if a 5-star high school player wanted to come play for him, he doubts he would take them, because he just doesn't think you can win with high school players right now. So pretty interesting dynamic. In football, it's a lot different, I guess, because you've got so many more players on the roster. we do see a lot of the really good teams involved heavily with the portal. You've seen some of the good teams, Ohio State, Notre Dame, who was the national championship game this year. We've seen them dip in from a quarterback standpoint. Notre Dame's last 2 years with Sam Hartman from Wake Forest, and then Riley Leonard from Duke, and then obviously Will Howard with Ohio State this year, who they got from Kansas State. So I think in football, the bigger schools at least can, afford to use the portal to fill holes. You're certainly not going to try to fill your whole roster. You don't need to when you're those schools, because you're already getting the cream of the crop out of high school. Something else that I think is going to be interesting to follow too is if a lot of these bigger schools, again, especially in basketball, decide that they are going to ride the portal and that's where they're going to build their roster. Then what happens to all these kids coming out of high school? Somebody's going to take them. And so obviously you've got some of your blue blood schools, Kentucky, Duke, Carolina, and so on, who, like we discussed, are still bringing in great recruiting classes every year. And it's not just those three. Obviously there's more. Auburn, there's a ton of them, not a ton, but there's a lot of them. But to me, if the new trend, and a lot of coaches that were surveyed did say that they prefer now to deal with the portal. So in that case, it seems to me that there's going to be a lot of high school talent that normally would be getting would be going to some of these big schools, who now are going to have to find alternatives. So does that mean some of your second tier, third tier schools are going to, be lucky enough to start loading up with some of these freshmen that they probably would never had a chance at under the old system? I think so. The bad part about that is they're going to bring those kids in and they're going to coach them up, and they're going to, give them all the exposure in the world, and then they're going to leave after 1 year. And so again, I don't know if that's part of whatever they decide to do with the NIL and the portal, but that's something else I think that would have to be figured out. You don't want it to turn into, and it kind of already is, but you don't want it to turn into, what we have. And let's just use Major League Baseball as an example, where you have teams like the Pittsburgh Pirates, who basically, if they are lucky enough to bring some good homegrown talent into the system, they lose them to free agency, or they have to trade them before the player becomes a free agent because they just can't afford to pay him. And it'll be interesting to see, speaking of the Pirates, what they do with a guy like Paul Skeens, who is as good of a pitcher as we've seen in a long time. Pittsburgh drafted him obviously out of LSU. So, he's going to get paid when his time comes, and he's got a couple of years until that happens. I'd be shocked if the Pirates don't offer him some type of long-term deal soon, like a lot of the teams we've seen do with younger talent, like the Atlanta Braves. They've done a good job with that. But he may not want to sign it. He may want to wait because he knows that there's a bigger paycheck down the road and a bigger market. But I'd hate to see that happen in college basketball. We can talk about a team locally here in UNC Charlotte who last year and the year before that had really good basketball seasons, and it was great to see. But they lose 3 or 4 of their really good players in the portal. One's at Louisville, one's at Minnesota, one's in Nebraska. And I'm missing one other one, but they've lost these kids, and their team this year has just been bad because of lack of talent. And when you lose that many guys, with not a whole lot of notice, it's hard to rebound from that. So you probably are going to see some of the schools have a year like Charlotte's having this year, where they're really struggling, and you take it on the chin for a year, and hopefully you rebuild and bring in guys next season. And how are you going to do that? The quickest way is the portal, and then obviously bringing in some of the recruits. But the dynamic in college sports right now is unreal, and it's something that we've never seen before. And like I said, I think what we're seeing now will be totally different in 3 to 5 years from a conference standpoint and from an NIL portal standpoint, because it's all moving in that direction. But it's been fun to watch. Look, we wouldn't have, the college playoffs expanded, and I think, for the most part, everybody enjoyed that. I'm sure they're going to expand again in the next 2 years, 3 years. I think there's talk of going to 20 teams. So I think we'll see that. And again, everything I'm talking about right here, everything we're discussing when it comes to college athletics, all revolves around money, every bit of it, as does pretty much everything in our world. But where the money goes, or where these guys are going to follow, whether it's the TV deals, and I mean, there's just so much money involved when it comes to college athletics, especially college football and college basketball. So will be interesting to watch. But I thought that was kind of a interesting thing to look at, and if they did break them up by team, or excuse me, by sports. And we'll post some of this stuff on our website, suitupsports.com, and put some on socials too, so you can kind of get a look at what the conferences would be and kind of what we discussed. But I think it's going to be interesting and fun to watch over the next couple 2-3 years. But that'll do it for our show today. I want to thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Big D, our big producer over there. First show we've done solo without a co-host, so hopefully we kept you entertained. And Shannon, again, thank you for joining us from Sacramento. Great as always. And we'll be back with you Friday night at 8 o'clock. Thank you.